My name is Alara. I'm a painter, or at least I'm trying to be. I see the world in layers of color and light, in the spaces between things, in the way a shadow can hold more truth than a sunlit face. For the last year, I'd been living 2 states away, trying to paint a life for myself on a fresh canvas, one that wasn't stained with the muted, passive colors of my childhood home. I came back to Oakhaven without warning. Just showed up one evening in a cloud of autumn chill and the scent of distant wood smoke. The moment I stepped inside, nothing felt familiar. The air, once filled with the scent of my mother's lavender sachets and the faint, sweet smell of old books, was now thick with an artificial pine fragrance, sharp and sterile. No one looked surprised to see me, not really. There was a flicker of something in my mother's eyes, annoyance, perhaps, or inconvenience, but not shock. No one saved me a seat at the dinner table. It was set for 4, a perfect, gleaming tableau of a family I no longer belonged to. Then I heard it, a sound that cut through the polite clinking of silverware and the low murmur of conversation. It was a cry, choked off before it could become a full scream, from behind a locked door upstairs. My sister's door. I called 911. But what they found inside that night wasn't just a single moment of violence. It was the culmination of years of secrets, of a silence wrapped in forced smiles and perfectly arranged throw pillows. It was the legacy of a man who called himself our stepfather, but owned every room we breathed in, every silence we kept. And the worst part, the part that still lodges in my throat like a shard of glass, wasn't just what he did to her. It was who chose not to see it. How do you come back from that? Or maybe the better question is, how do you learn to breathe again in a house where the danger is woven into the very fabric of the walls, and the ones you love most are the architects of your silence? I hadn't planned on coming home that day. Truth be told, I didn't tell anyone I was coming. After months of my texts sitting on read, of calls that spiraled into the void of voicemail, I figured my physical presence would be harder to ignore than a digital plea. And besides, a small, selfish part of me needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to see what, or who, had so completely taken my place. The bus sighed to a stop at the corner of Maple and Elm, 2 blocks from the house. I asked the driver to wait a moment, just letting the hiss of the hydraulic doors fill the silence. I needed to gather myself. The air was cool and sharp, carrying the first earthy hints of Oakhaven's reluctant autumn. The sycamore trees that lined our street were shedding their leaves, great rust-colored palms carpeting the pavement. It looked like they, too, were trying to let something go. The porch light was on, a sterile white LED that threw harsh shadows across the lawn. That surprised me. My mother, Celeste, was a creature of habit and economy. She never left lights on before dusk. I stood on the curb for a long minute, my duffel bag a leaden weight on my shoulder, watching the windows flicker with the warm, unsteady light of candles. There were silhouettes moving inside, the faint sound of laughter. The weight of my bag had nothing to do with the clothes and sketchbooks inside. It was the silence behind the front door that made it so heavy. I hesitated before reaching for the old key on my ring. It was worn smooth, the brass dull. No one had asked for it back, but no one had told me it would still work either. I turned it slowly in the lock, and the click it made was a sharp, definitive sound in the quiet evening, an intrusion. The scent hit me first. Roasted garlic, rosemary, something rich and savory. Then the voices. The low, pleasant murmur of conversation, punctuated by a deep, theatrical laugh that could only belong to Marcus. He was a man who performed charm, who wore it like a well-tailored suit. When I stepped into the foyer, no one turned. The dining room was illuminated by candlelight, the table a landscape of polished wood and gleaming plates. 4 seats taken. My mother, her back to me, her posture a little too perfect. Marcus, holding court at the head of the table, a wine glass poised in his hand. My sister, Lena, was half smiling, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. And a woman I didn't recognize, probably a colleague of Marcus's from his tech firm, ClearPath Digital. Plates were full, glasses clinked, and jokes were passed around like an appetizer. No one looked up. There was no pause in the rhythm of their meal, not even when I let my duffel bag slide from my shoulder to the hardwood floor with a soft thud. Finally, Celeste turned. Alara. Her voice wasn't surprised, just questioning. Like I was a misplaced object she couldn't quite identify. "We weren't expecting you," she added, her hand fluttering to her water glass, a nervous gesture meant to smooth over the awkwardness. My eyes scanned the table. For chairs, for place settings, for napkins. Not a single space left. "I can see that," I murmured, my voice smaller than I intended. I stood there, one hand still gripping the strap of my bag, feeling like a child forgotten at school pickup. "It's fine," I said, already feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "I'll just grab something later." Marcus flashed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a precise, practiced movement of his lips. "We can pull up a stool from the kitchen, sweetheart." "It's no problem." "No, I'm good," I said, maybe too quickly. Lena still hadn't looked up from her plate. I made my way to the kitchen, pretending to be fascinated by the contents of the refrigerator. I didn't need anything. I just couldn't stand in that doorway for another second, a ghost at my own family's feast. I heard Celeste whisper something to Marcus. He chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. "She always did have a flair for the dramatic, didn't she?" he said, not bothering to lower his voice. It hit me like a physical blow. Not the words themselves, but the casual cruelty of them, spoken as if I wasn't there. I had become an anecdote in my own home. I stood behind the kitchen island, a granite barrier between their world and mine, and watched them. Celeste reached out and touched Marcus's hand, a small, placating gesture. Lena barely ate, just pushed her food around her plate with her fork. The guest laughed at another of Marcus's stories. They were a complete picture. I was the unfinished brushstroke on the edge of the canvas, the one you wipe away. When they started clearing the plates, I slipped upstairs. My room, if I could still call it that, was a stranger to me. Gone were the deep lavender curtains I'd chosen when I was 15, the ones that made the morning light soft and dreamy. Gone were the dozens of Polaroids I'd taped around the mirror frame. In their place were beige drapes, a sterile gray rug, and a bed made with military precision, covered in a comforter that smelled of nothing, certainly not of me. The closet was filled with neatly labeled storage bins. A folded treadmill leaned against the far wall. It wasn't a bedroom anymore. It was a utility space. I sat on the edge of the bed, my gaze sweeping the room, searching for a single remnant of myself. On the bookshelf, tucked between a row of Marcus's self-help hardbacks, I spotted something small and familiar. A hand-painted wooden box. I moved closer. It was the box I'd made for Lena's last birthday. I'd spent weeks on it, painting tiny, intricate constellations on the lid, the ones we used to trace in the sky from our bedroom windows. The colors were her favorites, deep indigo, silver, and a whisper of teal. I remembered wrapping it carefully, a handwritten note tucked inside, for my North Star. Sisters always. She'd never mentioned receiving it. Now, I knew why. At dinner, I had heard the guest admiring it on the mantelpiece. "It's exquisite, Marcus," she'd cooed. "Wherever did you find it?" "An artist I know," he'd replied smoothly. "A little gift for Lena. She loves the stars." He hadn't just regifted it. He'd stolen the sentiment, the very heart of it. I picked it up, the wood cool and smooth in my hands, then placed it back exactly where it had been. What was the point of saying anything? Who would believe me? Who would even care? Back in what used to be my room, I curled into a corner of the bed that still held the faint indentation of my body. My phone lit up with a few texts from friends back at school, asking about my latest project. Nothing from Celeste. Nothing from Lena. I opened a draft message to my best friend, Chloe, and typed, "What if you come home and realize you were never really there at all?" I didn't hit send. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering how a place could be so full of people and yet so profoundly empty. I lay there for a long time, the words I'd typed to Chloe still glowing on the screen. I watched the little cursor blink in the text box, pulsing like a weak heart. What if you come home and realize you were never really there at all? It was just after 9. The house had settled into a low hum, the dishwasher running its cycle downstairs, a quiet, domestic sound that felt like a lie. I needed to stretch my legs, to see something that reminded me I wasn't just a figment of my own memory. I left the room and found myself in the hallway, standing outside Lena's door. A sliver of light escaped from underneath. I tapped gently. No answer. The door was ajar, and it swung open slightly with the softest creak. She was standing in front of her dresser, her back to me, slowly unbraiding her long hair. Her reflection in the mirror was distant, her eyes unfocused. She saw me standing there, but only her eyes flickered in my direction for a second before they dropped back to her own hands. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "You okay?" Her movements slowed. "Just tired." The words were soft, flat, and perfectly rehearsed. It was the kind of line you deliver when you've stopped expecting anyone to ask a follow-up question. I didn't buy it. Not for a second. I took a step closer into the room. "You sure? I mean, last year you were texting me almost every day. Now I'm back and it feels like you're a million miles away." Lena finally turned to face me, but her arms were crossed tightly over her stomach, as if she were physically holding herself together. "It's been a long day, Alara." Alara. She only used my full name when she was building a wall. I nodded, biting back the urge to push, to demand the truth I could feel vibrating in the air between us. That's when the atmosphere in the hallway shifted. Footsteps, heavier ones, ascended the stairs. Marcus. He rounded the corner with a coffee mug in his hand, wearing that same placid half-smile from dinner. "Girls, everything all right?" he asked, his tone light, almost amused. Then, placing a hand on Lena's shoulder with a casual, proprietary ease, he added, "Chit-chat later, okay? Lena needs to help me go over some of my presentation slides." His hand didn't linger, but it was long enough. I saw it. Lena stiffened under his touch, a barely perceptible tremor that shot through her frame. Her gaze fell to the floor. She didn't look at him. She didn't look at me. I didn't say a word, but I saw everything. Marcus turned his smile on me. "Don't worry, Alara. You two will have plenty of time to catch up." He guided her down the hall, his hand now on the small of her back, like a man steering a precious, fragile object. Lena's eyes never met mine again. I stood alone in that hallway, staring at the empty space where her shadow had just been. My heart felt like a stone in my chest. Back in my temporary room, I sat down on the edge of the bed without turning on the light. I just watched the ceiling fan turn, its slow, rhythmic circles a stark contrast to the chaos spiraling inside me. The way she'd recoiled from his touch, it wasn't just discomfort. It was fear. And it dredged up a memory I had pushed so deep it had almost disappeared. It was just over a year ago. A rainy Thursday night. I'd found Lena crying in the laundry room, her head buried in a pile of clean towels. I'd assumed it was about a boy from school, some trivial teenage heartbreak. When I asked if she was okay, she'd looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and fierce. "You should just go," she'd whispered, her voice raw. "You always get to leave." A week later, Marcus had a talk with my mother. I'd overheard parts of it. "Alara needs more structure. Her attitude has become so negative. She's starting to act out." Celeste, exhausted from working double shifts at the hospital, didn't argue. 3 days after that, a glossy brochure for Silverwood Academy, a boarding school 3 hours away, appeared on the kitchen counter. And, just like that, I was gone. Now, lying in this sterile, beige version of my old room, I began to wonder. Was I sent away because I'd asked the wrong question at the wrong time? Was my attitude simply a refusal to look away? My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A new email. An update from the art college I'd applied to. I didn't open it. Instead, I pulled the thin comforter around me, trying to will my breathing to slow down and listen to the quiet outside my door. It wasn't truly silent. There were muffled sounds, a soft bump against a wall, a low murmur of voices, then nothing. I strained to hear more, anything. But the quiet that followed was thick, heavy, like the air had turned to syrup. I grabbed my phone and typed a new message to Lena. "Are you okay?" I waited. The 3 dots never appeared. I clicked the phone off and stared at my own reflection in the black screen. The fan turned above me. The sliver of light under my door flickered as someone moved past in the hall. Then quiet again. Something in my chest tightened into a cold, hard knot. This wasn't just a tired sister. This wasn't about presentation slides. This wasn't me overthinking things. It was fear. real and breathing and living right on the other side of my door. I pulled the comforter tighter around me, my heart drumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs. And somewhere in the deepest part of me, a terrible realization began to settle. I hadn't just come home for a visit. I'd walked back into a house full of people pretending everything was fine, while something inside these walls was deeply, horribly wrong. 2 nights later, I found myself once again wide awake, staring at the ceiling fan. Its slow, hypnotic rotation had become the only constant in a world that had tilted off its axis. I tried closing my eyes, but the silence in the house was too loud. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the weighted silence of secrets, the kind that presses down on you in the dark. I sat up in bed, glancing at the glowing red numbers on the alarm clock, 12:16 a.m. The house was dead still, but the image of Lena flinching under Marcus's hand was burned into my mind. It played on a loop, a scene I wished I could rewind and study, frame by painful frame. Every instinct I had screamed that something was wrong. The way her bright, curious eyes had dulled to a flat, vacant gray. The way she moved through her own home like a trespasser. I shifted under the thin blanket, hoping a change in position might ease the knot of anxiety in my chest. It didn't. Instead, my senses sharpened. I started listening more intently to the house itself, to the groans of the old floorboards, the sigh of the furnace, the small creaks and groans that are the language of a house settling in the night. Then I heard it. A noise. Short, sharp, muffled. Not loud, but unmistakably human. I froze, my body tensing, my heart jumping ahead of my thoughts. Then came the sound that shattered whatever fragile illusion of normalcy was left. A scream, abruptly cut off. It wasn't the kind you hear in movies, full-throated and cinematic. This was low, guttural, like someone trying not to scream but failing. It was the sound of pain breaking through a dam of silence. I threw the blanket off and was in the hallway before I was fully aware of moving. Marcus's door, the master bedroom at the end of the hall, was closed. A line of light bled from underneath, flickering slightly, as if someone were pacing inside. I knocked once hard. Lena? No answer. I knocked again, my fist pounding against the solid wood. Lena, it's me. Ilara. Still, only silence. I twisted the doorknob. Locked. I didn't think. I just started hammering on the door. Open the door, Marcus. Open this door right now. Something thudded against the wall from inside. Then another noise, softer this time, like weeping. That's when I stopped knocking and scrambled for my phone. My fingers were trembling so badly I fumbled the passcode twice before the screen lit up. I hit the emergency call icon. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the panic clawing at my throat. My name is Ilara Vance. I think my sister is being hurt by my stepfather. Please, you have to send someone. It's 114 Maple Avenue. Can you confirm the address, ma'am? I repeated it, my voice cracking. Is anyone in immediate danger? Yes, I choked out. I think she is. Please, just get here. I hung up and pressed my ear against the door again. I couldn't hear anything now. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. The silence returned, but this time it felt menacing, mocking. Then, in the distance, sirens. Not the full, blaring wail, but that first, rising echo as they drew closer. My knees felt weak with a dizzying rush of relief, but I didn't step away from the door. I stayed there, guarding it, a sentinel for a truth I couldn't yet name. The front door opened downstairs. I heard voices call out, Oakhaven Police, and then the sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs. Just as 2 officers reached the top landing, Marcus's bedroom door opened. He looked completely composed. His shirt was tucked in, his hair slightly mussed, but not in a way that suggested a struggle. He wore an expression of mild concern, the look of a man who has been inconvenienced, but is trying to remain polite. Is everything okay, Ilara? He asked, his voice dripping with false concern, as if I were a hysterical child who'd had a nightmare. Behind him, I saw Lena. She was sitting on the floor, her legs drawn up to her chest. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red and swollen. The collar of her t-shirt was torn, hanging off one shoulder. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stared at the floor. Two officers stepped past Marcus before he could say another word. "Sir, please step back." Marcus complied, raising his hands in a gesture of placid cooperation, doing his best impression of a model citizen. One of the officers, a woman with kind but weary eyes, knelt beside Lena. "Are you all right, honey?" Lena's lips moved, but no sound came out. She just shook her head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. The second officer pulled Marcus aside. He began his performance, a routine I recognized from his conversations with teachers, with neighbors, with my own mother. Calm, polished, sympathetic. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding, officers," he said, his voice smooth as silk. She slipped and fell, hit her head. "I was just getting some ice for her when Alara started. Well, you saw. It didn't match what I saw. It didn't match what I heard." They brought Lena downstairs. A paramedic wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Another officer guided her outside to the ambulance. She never looked back at me. I started to follow but stopped at the front door. I didn't want Marcus behind me. He stepped up beside me, his presence a cold weight in the air. With the nerve of a man who had rehearsed his innocence 1,000 times, he leaned in and murmured, "You've made quite a scene, Alara. Are you sure this is the kind of attention our family needs?" I turned to him, my voice finally steady, cold with a certainty that surprised even me. "You are not going to get away with this." He smiled, a thin, cruel line. "Get away with what, sweetheart?" "Her clumsiness." Then he turned and walked coolly toward the officers to give his official statement. Back inside, the living room felt cavernous and cold. Celeste sat on the couch, her arms crossed so tightly her knuckles were white. She hadn't spoken a single word since the police arrived. I waited for her to say something, anything. Finally, she stood up, her movements stiff. "This is a mess," she muttered, heading for the stairs. "A mess?" I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. "That's all you have to say? Your daughter was on the floor, crying her eyes out." "She said she slipped," Celeste snapped, turning on the bottom step to face me. "And maybe if you hadn't been so dramatic and called the entire neighborhood." I cut her off. "She didn't slip, Mom." I took a step toward her. "She flinches when he touches her." She thanked him for a gift I made her. She looked terrified tonight. "Open your eyes." My mother just shook her head, a look of profound, willed ignorance on her face. "You've been gone a long time, Alara. You don't know what it's been like. You don't know him." She turned and walked up the stairs, leaving me alone in the wreckage. I spent the rest of the night pacing the cold hardwood floors, replaying the scream, the click of the lock, the vacant look in Lena's eyes. At 4 a.m., I heard a soft knock on my door. I opened it to find Lena standing there, dressed in a clean set of pajamas, her hair pulled back, her eyes still raw. Her voice was a fragile whisper, cracking on the first word. "Why now, Alara?" I didn't know what to say. She looked at me, her expression not accusatory, but lost, like someone asking for a map in a foreign land. "Why did it take you so long to come home?" I didn't answer her. I couldn't. I couldn't even breathe. Her words, soft and brittle, hung in the space between us like a cracked mirror, reflecting a truth I wasn't ready to face. She waited a few seconds more, then turned and walked back to her room, closing her door without a sound. By morning, the air in the house had turned heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I came downstairs barefoot, the chill of the floor seeping into my skin, and found the kitchen already alive with the scent of coffee and toast. Celeste stood at the stove, humming a tuneless melody, performing normalcy with a desperate intensity. Marcus wasn't there. His bedroom door had remained closed since before dawn. Celeste didn't look at me when I entered. She just gestured with her chin toward the counter. "Coffee's fresh." I poured a cup, my hands steady out of sheer defiance. "He's not here." "No," she said, flipping a pancake with a flick of her wrist. "He went down to the station this morning to give a voluntary statement, clear all this up." I leaned against the cool metal of the refrigerator. "They had a reason to be here, Mom." "You heard her. You saw her face." Celeste spun around, spatula in hand, her eyes sharp and cold. What I saw was you, Alara, banging on a locked door in the middle of the night. What I heard was you, accusing your stepfather of God knows what in front of the entire neighborhood. You embarrassed us. Embarrassed us? I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She was on the floor, shaking. Her shirt was torn. That is not a misunderstanding. She said she slipped. No, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. That's what he told her to say. And you're just swallowing it whole. Celeste stared at me, her jaw clenched. Do you have any idea what you've done? You are trying to destroy this family. The accusation struck me with the force of a slap. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. He already did that. I'm just the one who finally turned on the lights. She didn't respond. She just turned her back on me and went back to her pancakes. An hour later, I got a call from Officer Quinn, the woman who had knelt by Lena's side. She asked me to come to the station to give a formal statement. They had already spoken with Marcus and my mother. She didn't say if they'd spoken to Lena. She didn't have to. The drive to the station felt like moving through a dream. Everything outside the car window looked painfully normal. People jogging, school buses making their slow, deliberate stops, someone watering their lawn. It was as if the world had no idea how ugly things could get behind a closed door. At the station, Officer Quinn took my report with a calm professionalism that was both a comfort and a frustration. I told her everything. What I saw, what I heard, the memory of finding Lena in the laundry room, the regifted box. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just laid out the quiet, terrible facts. When I was done, she nodded and handed me a tissue I hadn't realized I needed. In the lobby on my way out, I saw Marcus talking to another officer. His posture was perfect, his hands folded behind his back, his tone measured and reasonable. If I didn't know better, I would have thought he was a concerned parent discussing a school issue. I didn't approach him. I didn't have to. I could already hear his version of the story echoing in my head. My stepdaughter has a history of emotional instability. She's always been dramatic. She's struggling with the loss of her father. He would say it all with a sad, paternal sigh, and they would nod. And maybe, just maybe, some of them would believe him. I returned to a house that had given up on pretending. Celeste sat in the living room, arms crossed, eyes glued to a talk show that buzzed just loud enough to drown out any possibility of conversation. I walked past her without a word. Upstairs, I found my room exactly as I had left it. Sterile, impersonal. The storage bins in the closet seemed more at home here than I did. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my duffel bag. I still hadn't unpacked. Celeste knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for an answer. You should have asked before you came back. I turned slowly. Excuse me. This is my house, Alara. My life. You can't just barge back in after a year of silence, stir everything up, and expect us to, what? Thank you. I stood up, a cold calm settling over me. You're right. It is your house. But don't you dare pretend that I left because I wanted to. Her arms folded across her chest. You're twisting everything. No, I said, my voice low and clear. I'm finally seeing it straight. She left, leaving the door wide open behind her, a final, passive-aggressive act. Later that night, I opened my sketchbook. The pages were mostly blank, filled with a few half-hearted charcoal studies from months ago. On a fresh page, I wrote in bold, clear letters, "They want me to disappear. I won't." Downstairs, the front door opened and closed. Marcus was back. I waited a moment, took a deep breath, and went down. He was standing by the kitchen counter, pouring a glass of water, as if it were any other night. You think this is over? He asked, his back still to me. I didn't answer. He turned, a smirk playing on his lips. You're playing a dangerous game, Alara. Be careful who you make an enemy of. I stepped closer until I was standing on the other side of the island. You can fool her. You won't fool me. He leaned forward slightly, his smile turning colder, sharper. You'll regret this, little girl. I met his gaze, my own unwavering. Not as much as you will. He just chuckled and walked out of the room. I stood there, my hands gripping the edge of the granite counter until my knuckles were white. The weight of his threat settled in my stomach, a cold, heavy stone. 2 days passed in a thick, suffocating silence. We moved around each other like ghosts, the unspoken truths of that night a palpable presence in every room. Lena's door remained closed. I knocked once the next morning, lightly. No answer. I knocked again that night. Still nothing. I started leaving short notes, slipping them under her door. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Are you okay? They remained where they fell, untouched. On the third day, I was gathering laundry from the hallway hamper when I noticed Lena's door was slightly ajar. I peered in. Her bed was a mess of tangled sheets, uncharacteristic for my neat, methodical sister. It looked as if she'd been sleeping in her clothes for days. I just wanted some sign that she was still in there, the Lena I knew. That's when I saw it. Poking out from under the edge of her mattress was the corner of a worn, spiral-bound sketchbook. The cardboard cover was faded, one corner chewed, just like the ones she used to fill with drawings in middle school, impossibly long-limbed girls with shadows for eyes. My hands trembled as I reached for it. The first few pages were torn out. The ones that remained were filled with frantic, overlapping sketches and scrawled words. Most of it was illegible, a chaos of ink and emotion. But one entry under a drawing of a locked door was chillingly clear. Night. Locked in. Can't breathe. He said not to tell. Told me to pretend it's a game. The words were smudged in places, as if tears had fallen on the page before the ink was dry. I closed the sketchbook, my heart pounding. I held it for a moment, then walked back to my room. I sat on my bed and placed it beside the painted box he'd stolen credit for. These two objects, one a symbol of stolen love, the other a record of hidden pain, felt like the only real things in the house. Later that day, I brought the sketchbook to the police station. Officer Quinn met me and took me to a small, quiet interview room. I found this in my sister's room, I said, handing it to her. I don't think she wanted me to see it, but I couldn't leave it there. She nodded slowly, her expression unreadable as she flipped through the pages. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the spine of the book. I appreciate you bringing this in, Alara. We'll log it as evidence. She paused, then met my eyes. We also recovered the device you mentioned, the smart camera Marcus installed in the hallway. For security, he said. And? I asked, a flicker of hope igniting in my chest. She sighed, the sound heavy with frustration. The footage was wiped. A hard reset on the device, dated the morning after the incident. Could have been a malfunction, but we're treating it as intentional destruction of evidence. I swallowed, the taste of defeat sharp on my tongue. So, what now? Now we build a case, she said, her voice firm. It's harder without the footage, but it's not impossible. I left the station and walked home under a sky the color of slate. That evening, I felt the first real shift at school. The whispers weren't just whispers anymore. They had taken on a life of their own. During my art class, a counselor I didn't know, a young woman with an overly earnest smile, pulled me aside. I just wanted to check in, Alara, she said. We've noticed you seem a bit withdrawn. Is everything okay at home? I gave her a flat look. Define okay. She cleared her throat, flustered. Your stepfather, he reached out. He expressed some concern. Did he? I said, my voice dripping with ice. Yes. He said you've been struggling since you came back. That perhaps you're reacting to unresolved grief. About your father. My jaw locked. Don't you dare talk about my father. She blinked, taken aback. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm fine, I said, standing up. You don't have to go through this alone, Alara. I paused at the door and looked back at her. I already am. Later that night, as I sat on my bed, staring at the sketchbook and the painted box, I thought about how the system was built to protect men like Marcus. Men who smile at the right times, who speak in calm, reasonable tones, who know exactly how to paint a teenage girl as unstable and emotional. I knew this was far from over. He wouldn't just let this go. I took a sticky note from my desk and wrote carefully, "You don't have to talk. But you're not alone. I believe you. And I am not leaving." I slipped it under Lena's door. Then I went back to my room, back to the two objects on my nightstand, back to the place where hope and fury were learning to coexist. A week slid by, thick with a tension that clung to the walls like damp. I woke each day to the same oppressive silence, moved through the house like an unwelcome spirit, and went asleep in a room that still smelled of nothing. But I stayed. I had to. My presence, even an ignored one, was a form of resistance. The notes I slipped under Lena's door remained untouched, small, colorful squares of hope lying on the dusty floor of the hallway. Still, I left a new one each day. At school, the atmosphere had chilled. It wasn't overt bullying, it was something more insidious. Whispers that stopped when I walked by. Eyes that darted away too quickly. People knew something, or at least they thought they did, and their conclusions were written in their avoidance. It was a Wednesday when the head guidance counselor, Ms. Albright, called me into her office. She was a woman in her late 40s with a kind face and a voice that always sounded on the verge of an apology. "Alara, honey, do you have a minute?" I followed her into the softly lit office and sat in the chair opposite her desk. The blinds were drawn, casting the room in a muted, confidential light. It felt like an interrogation room designed by a home decor blogger. She folded her hands on her desk. "I just wanted to check in. We've heard there's been some tension at home." I said nothing, just watched her. She continued, her voice gentle. "Sometimes, when we go through difficult transitions, or when we feel unsupported, it's easy to project our own discomfort onto those around us. Even the people who care about us most deeply." My jaw tightened. "You think I'm making this up?" "No, of course not," she said quickly, but her eyes betrayed her. "That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that trauma can be a very confusing thing. Perhaps what you're experiencing isn't a literal interpretation of events. Our emotions can be very powerful." "I didn't imagine the police at my house," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "I didn't imagine my sister's torn shirt or the fact she hasn't come out of her room in a week." Ms. Albright shifted in her seat, her patient expression making my skin crawl. "We're just trying to make sure you have support, Alara. And that you're not letting personal grief cloud your perception." Personal grief. She meant my father. Again. I stood up. "I'm good. Thanks for the support." I walked out of that room shaking, not with fear, but with a white-hot rage that made my fingers go numb. It was one thing for my mother to be blind. It was another for the entire system to be complicit in that blindness. That night, the whispers exploded into a roar. An anonymous post appeared on a local Oak Haven community blog. The title was "When a Cry for Help Becomes a Cry for Attention." It painted me as a troubled, dramatic girl, someone who had always created chaos. It twisted moments from my past into weapons. The time I'd argued with a history teacher over a biased textbook, the time in middle school I'd shoved a boy who kept pulling Lena's hair. All of it was presented without context, a carefully curated collection of my worst moments, designed to discredit me. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and hit record. I didn't write a script. I didn't plan my words. I just looked directly into the camera's small, unblinking eye. "My name is Alara," I began, my voice quiet but steady. "And I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to speak, because silence is a choice. And it's the choice that lets darkness grow." I talked about the nature of abuse, how it often hides not in shouts and bruises, but in quiet manipulations, in the slow erosion of a person's confidence, in the way a girl is taught that her discomfort is an overreaction. I never mentioned a single name. I ended with a question. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? But what if everyone is standing right there and they all just choose not to listen? I uploaded it to a throwaway video account. No tags, no promotion. Just truth, sent out into the void. The next morning, it had 50 views. By that evening, 300. By the end of the weekend, it had been shared over 1,000 times. The comments started to pour in. "My sister went through this too. I never said anything. I regret it every day. I believe you. Thank you for speaking." That Monday, I took Lena's sketchbook to Ms. Adler, my old high school art teacher. She was the one who taught me that art wasn't about making pretty pictures, it was about telling the truth. I handed her the book, my hands shaking slightly, and explained what it was, what I thought it meant. She flipped through the pages, her brow furrowed with concern, her eyes scanning the frantic drawings and smeared ink. Then she looked up at me, her expression filled with a weary sadness that broke my heart. "Elara, I'm so sorry you're all going through this," she said softly. "But this isn't enough. These are incomplete thoughts, fragments. Without more context, a lawyer would say this is just the journal of a troubled young girl. It wouldn't hold up as anything more than that." I stared at her. "She wrote, he said not to tell. What more context do you need?" She shook her head, looking pained. "It's not about what I need. It's about what's admissible. What's provable." I left her classroom feeling more disappointed than surprised. Another door closed. Another adult choosing the path of least resistance. That night, as I scrolled numbly through the comments on my video, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Officer Quinn. Saw your video. Don't stop. The more you speak, the more cracks you make in the wall." Somehow, that short, simple message meant more than any teacher's sympathy or counselor's concern. I scrolled through the comments again. One, posted just minutes before, caught my eye. It was from a private profile, no name, no picture. "He's done this before. You're not crazy. Check Northwood Middle School. 2016. I read it 3 times. Northwood Middle. The school Marcus had taught it before he met my mother, before he moved to Oak Haven and reinvented himself as a tech mogul. If what that message said was true, this wasn't just about my family. It was bigger and deeper, and I was holding the shovel. After reading that comment, check Northwood Middle School. 2016, I didn't sleep. I spent the night hunched over my laptop, the screen's cold blue light burning into my eyes, my heart a frantic drum against the rising tide of what I was beginning to uncover. Morning came, gray and muted, as if the sky itself was trying to apologize for what the night had revealed. I didn't wait for breakfast, didn't wait for another silent, tense encounter with Celeste. I went straight back to my laptop. I started digging. Northwood Middle, a school in the next county over, had an archaic website, full of old newsletters and staff directories. Buried in the archives, under a November 2016 bulletin, I found a single, innocuous line in the staff transitions section. "Mr. Marcus Thorne will be departing Northwood to pursue new opportunities in the private sector. We thank him for his years of service." That alone wasn't a red flag. But the timing was. I opened another tab and started searching local parent forums from that era, archived community group pages, anything I could find. That's where I found it. A thread from a parent group, dated 2 days before the school's official announcement. "My daughter is deeply uncomfortable around her science teacher, Mr. Thorne. She says he makes weird jokes, stands too close. A few of her friends have said the same. The school says he's one of their best teachers. Not sure what to do." A few replies followed, other parents echoing the sentiment, but hesitantly. Then, a final comment on the thread, posted weeks later. "He's gone. The school won't say why. Just transferred out. No investigation. It's like it never happened." My hands curled into fists. It wasn't just us. He had a pattern. That afternoon, an email landed in my inbox. The sender was a name I didn't recognize, Finn Carter. The subject line was just one word, Northwood. The message inside was short. I was in his 8th grade class in 2016. I saw how he was with some of the girls. I never said anything. I was afraid of getting in trouble, of not being believed. That silence is one of the biggest regrets of my life. "I saw your video. I won't be silent anymore." I stared at those words, letting them sink in. I messaged him back, and we agreed to talk on the phone the next day. When we did, I didn't have to pull a single word out of him. He spoke with the clarity of someone who had been replaying a memory for years, waiting for someone to finally ask about it. He had this way of complimenting girls on things that were inappropriate, Finn told me, his voice quiet but firm. Like their mature posture or their poise. He'd put his hand on a girl's shoulder to encourage her, but it would linger too long. Back then, I just thought it was weird. I thought if no one else was making a big deal out of it, maybe I was the one overreacting. He paused. Now I know that's what he counts on. Our silence. Our doubt. That night at dinner, I tried to bring it up to Celeste. I found something, I said, pushing my uneaten food around my plate. She didn't look up from her phone. About Northwood Middle, I continued, my voice steady. Back in 2016. There were other girls, Mom. He didn't just leave. He was forced out quietly. Her fingers stopped scrolling. She looked at me for the first time all week, her eyes hard. You've been snooping. Digging up dirt. I'm not snooping. I'm connecting dots that you refuse to see. She stood up so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. You are looking for drama, Alara. You don't care about this family, you never have. You just want to burn everything to the ground so you can feel important. I stood too, more slowly. You're angry because I'm doing the thing you should have done from the beginning. You're angry because I'm protecting her. Her mouth opened, as if to argue, then snapped shut. From the doorway, a calm voice cut through the tension. You're making enemies you can't see, Alara. Marcus stood there, leaning against the frame, a look of pitying amusement on his face. Good, I shot back. Let them step into the light. He didn't have to answer. His smirk was answer enough. The next day, I requested a 5-minute slot to speak at the upcoming virtual town council meeting. I told them I had information concerning the safety and vetting of educators who work with children in our community. They granted it. I spent the day preparing. I printed screenshots of the Northwood Parent Forum, of Finn's written statement which he'd emailed to me, even of the official school bulletin announcing Marcus's quiet departure. I had my facts lined up, my words ready. Not scripted, but solid. When the meeting started that night, I logged in early, my heart hammering against my ribs. When my turn came, I took a deep breath and began. My name is Alara Vance. I'm a resident of Oakhaven, and I need to speak to you tonight about a man who has a documented history of inappropriate behavior with children, a man who is living in our community right now. I was 3 minutes in, just about to share the screenshot of the Northwood parent complaints, when my screen went black. The live stream froze. I checked the public link on my phone. The feed was down. Video unavailable. I refreshed. Nothing. A moment later, my connection to the meeting platform was severed completely. My phone lit up with texts. What happened? Did your internet cut out? Are you okay? I stared at the blank screen, my hands ice cold. He had done this. Somehow, with his tech savvy, he had silenced me again. 10 minutes later, Officer Quinn called. I was watching, Alara, she said, her voice tight with anger. That was no accident. Your stream was tampered with. By him. We can't prove it yet. But while his digital trail might be clean, his house isn't. We got the warrant. You remember that smart speaker in your living room? Yeah, I said, my breath catching. Mom bought it on sale. We barely use it. Well, she said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. It's been making short, automatic audio recordings and backing them up to the cloud. We found one from 2 weeks ago. We found the audio, Alara. It was a gray morning, the kind that hangs low over Oakhaven like a held breath. We arrived at the courthouse just after 8. Lena sat beside me in the back of Officer Quinn's unmarked car, her hands tucked under her thighs, her eyes locked on the blur of buildings passing outside. She hadn't said a word since we left the house. Neither had I. There were no words for a morning like this. In the front seat, Quinn spoke quietly into her phone, confirming our arrival, reminding the prosecutor's office to have the file ready. We found the audio. Those 4 words had been echoing in my mind for 2 days, a fragile, ferocious drumbeat of hope. Inside the courthouse, the air smelled of floor wax, old paper, and a faint, collective anxiety. A bailiff led us to a small, windowless waiting room. Are you ready? I asked Lena, my voice barely a whisper. She didn't look at me, but she gave a single, firm nod. 20 minutes later, the door opened. We were called into the courtroom. I thought I would feel sick with nerves, but as I walked down the short aisle and saw Marcus sitting at the defendant's table in a perfectly tailored gray suit, I felt a strange and sudden clarity. He turned, caught my gaze, and offered a small, confident smile, as if this were all a tedious misunderstanding he would soon clear up. The prosecutor stood, introduced the evidence, and then Officer Quinn walked to the clerk's desk and handed over a small digital recorder. A bailiff pressed play. The courtroom was filled with the sound of muffled movement, the creak of furniture. A soft thump. Then his voice, cold and sharp. "You will keep your mouth shut if you know what's good for you." A moment of silence. Then, Lena's voice, small and cracked, but unmistakable. "Please stop." The room went utterly still. No papers shuffled. No one coughed. The judge leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. The audio ended, and the silence that followed was deafening. Marcus didn't move. Quinn stepped back. I turned to Lena. She was staring down at her lap, her hands trembling. Then, slowly, she stood up. "Miss Vance," the judge said, his voice gentle. "You may approach." She walked to the podium, her steps small but steady. Her voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger with every word. "He told me no one would believe me," she began, her eyes sweeping from the judge to Marcus, and then to our mother, who sat 2 rows behind us, her face a mask of anguish. "He said I was being dramatic, that I was imagining things. He said it was my fault when he came into my room at night. He said if I told anyone, I would be the one to tear our family apart." She paused, taking a shaky breath, her chin lifting. But Alara believed me. For the first time, she looked directly at me, her eyes full of a pain so deep it ached to see it, but also something new, something steady and strong. She came home. And she believed me. That's what saved me. The judge gave a brief nod, his gaze softening for just a second, then turned to the prosecution. Before he could speak, there was a movement in the gallery. My mother, Celeste, stood up. Her hands were shaking as she addressed the court. "I chose comfort over truth," she said, her voice choked with tears. "I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe my home, my life, was poisoned from the inside. And, because of my fear, my daughter suffered. I am so sorry. I was wrong." She walked to the clerk and handed over a thick manila envelope. I didn't need to see inside to know what it was. Divorce papers. When the judge read the sentence, his voice was level, devoid of emotion. "Marcus Thorne, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in the state penitentiary. You will not be eligible for parole for 10. Marcus stood still as the bailiffs approached. His expression didn't change, not even when the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. As they led him past us, he looked at me one last time. No words. Just that same quiet, smug smirk he'd worn the first day he walked into our lives. But this time, I didn't look away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps. Microphones and cameras were thrust in our faces. Before I could say anything, Lena stepped forward. "My name is Lena Vance," she said, her voice clear and carrying over the clamor. "And this," she reached for my hand, her grip firm and certain, "this is my sister. This is my family." They tried to ask more questions, but we didn't give them the chance. We just walked down the steps together, side by side, into the cool, clean air. That evening, back at the house, Celeste moved slowly through the living room, packing Marcus's things into cardboard boxes. Trophies, books, framed photos. The last thing to go is their wedding picture. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers tracing the glass, then dropped it into a box and sealed it with tape. "I should have known," she said softly, not looking at me. I think a part of me did. But knowing and admitting, they're not the same thing. I said nothing. I just let her speak. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to fix what I let him break." "You don't have to fix it alone," I said. We sat in the near-empty room for a long time, the silence no longer heavy, but spacious. The worst was over. The weight of what we'd survived would take longer to leave, but we would carry it together. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like a start.